The starship Aurora Dawn was alive with voices that night. Traders argued about prices, students laughed too loudly, families spoke in warm tones, and tired soldiers sat with silent eyes. The passenger deck was full, every seat taken except one. One seat stayed empty like it was cursed. Next to it sat a girl who didn't speak, didn't move much, didn't look anyone in the eye. She was alien, clearly not human. Her skin had a silver glow like moonlight. Her hair fell in smooth black waves down her back, and faint violet lights glimmered in her eyes whenever she looked up. But the real reason no one sat beside her wasn't her face or her strange eyes. It was the smell. It floated softly in the air around her, sweet and sharp at the same time, like flowers mixed with smoke and metal. For most species, especially humans, the smell was too strong. It made their throats itch and their eyes burn. Some passengers held scarves or hands over their noses when walking past her. Others whispered behind her back. "She shouldn't be on public transport," one man muttered. "Why doesn't she take a cargo ship instead?" another said. "Smells like a chemical spill," someone added, coughing loudly on purpose. The girl kept her head down. She had heard words like this since childhood. Her kind called it the mark of Sura, a natural scent her people carried in their blood. To them, it was normal. To everyone else, it was a curse. She wished she could switch it off just once so people would stop looking at her like she carried a disease. She wrapped her arms around herself and stared at the floor. The seat next to her stayed empty. It always stayed empty. Then the ship's door slid open with a metallic hiss. A human man stepped inside. He was tall, dressed in an old military jacket with a patch on the sleeve that looked like it had seen better days. His face carried the kind of scars that spoke of battles long past. He looked around for a seat. The cabin was full. Children sat on their parents' laps. Travelers squeezed together shoulder to shoulder. The only free space was the one beside the alien girl. People watched, curious. Surely he wouldn't sit there. But the man walked slowly down the aisle, his boots echoing softly on the metal floor. He stopped beside the empty seat, and then, without a word, he sat down. Gasps rose from nearby passengers. "Is he mad?" someone whispered. "Doesn't he smell it?" another said. "Humans, maybe their noses are broken," a man joked, earning a few nervous laughs. The alien girl froze. She expected him to sit only for a moment, to realize the mistake and leave like so many before him. But he leaned back, stretching his legs as if he owned the seat, eyes half closed like he was completely at ease. For the first time in years, someone stayed. The girl risked a glance at him. He was staring out the window at the stars streaking past in silence. He didn't seem bothered, not even a little. Finally, he turned his head toward her. "Hello," he said in a calm, low voice. She hesitated. "Hello." He smiled slightly. "Crowded ship. Looks like this was the only seat left." She lowered her gaze. "Most people, they don't stay." "I can see that," he said, looking around at the passengers watching them like it was a live drama. He leaned back again, eyes closing for a moment before speaking softly. "This smell, it reminds me of something." She blinked in surprise. "Reminds you? Of what?" He didn't answer right away. His face changed as if old memories moved behind his eyes. "There was a planet," he said finally, voice quiet. "Long ago. I was there during the war. There were flowers, whole fields of them. Same scent as this. I almost died there. But I didn't. And this smell, it stayed with me. Reminds me I lived." The girl stared at him. No one had ever said that before. To others, her scent was a curse. To him, it was life. For a long time, neither spoke. Around them, whispers continued, but the man ignored them completely. He closed his eyes again, breathing slowly like the scent brought him peace instead of discomfort. For the first time in her life, the alien girl felt the weight in her chest grow lighter. Maybe this journey would be different. Maybe this stranger wouldn't leave. Maybe her life was about to change. The ship Aurora Dawn kept moving silently through the endless dark of space. Stars burned bright outside the windows, but inside the passenger deck, the air felt heavy. People still whispered about the human man sitting beside the alien girl with the strange scent. They had never seen anything like this before. Passengers leaned toward each other, voices low but sharp. Why is he still sitting there? Maybe he's crazy. Or maybe he can't smell anything at all. The alien girl, Lariah, heard them. She always heard. Their words cut deep, the same way they always had since she was a child. She kept her eyes down, hands gripping the edge of her seat tightly. She didn't want to look at the man beside her. She didn't want to see pity on his face the way she had seen it on so many others before. But when he spoke, there was no pity in his voice. "My name's Daniel," he said simply. His voice was rough but calm, like he had seen too much in life to care what people thought. Lariah hesitated before answering softly. "Lariah." Daniel nodded once. "Nice name." She blinked, surprised. People didn't usually say things like that to her. For a moment, there was only the hum of the ship's engines. Daniel leaned back, eyes half closed, like he was remembering something far away. "You asked before," he said slowly, "about the smell, about the flowers." Lariah glanced at him. His face looked older than she first thought. Not old like age, but old like someone who carried too many memories. "They grew on a planet called Varin," he said. "I was there during the war. There was a battle, a bad one. We lost too many soldiers. After it ended, I was trapped for 3 days in a field full of those flowers. Same scent as this." He took a slow breath, his eyes unfocused like he was seeing it all again. "I thought I would die there, but rescue came on the 4th day. I lived, and this smell, it stayed with me. Reminds me I got out alive." Lariah didn't speak. She didn't know what to say. No one had ever told her that before. No one had ever connected her scent to anything except disgust. Daniel finally turned his head toward her. His eyes were steady, not cruel, not mocking. "You know," he said, "people fear what they don't understand. They think this smell means something bad. To me, it doesn't." Lariah's hands loosened on the seat. Her voice was quiet when she finally asked, "Do you know what they call me on my planet?" He shook his head. "The marked one," she whispered. "My own people say it too, because of this scent. No one wants to stand near me. No one wants to talk to me. My parents sent me away when I was 12. Said life would be easier somewhere else." Daniel's jaw tightened slightly. He didn't look away from her. "Sounds like they were wrong," he said. Lariah almost laughed, but it came out bitter. "Everywhere I go, people do this." She gestured toward the passengers who were still whispering, still watching them like they were part of some strange drama. Always the same stares, always the same words. Daniel leaned back in his seat, crossing his arms. His voice stayed calm. "Let them stare. I've been stared at too." That made her look at him properly for the first time. There were scars on his face, thin lines running across his cheek and jaw. Old wounds. He noticed her staring and smiled faintly. "War leaves marks," he said. "Some people see the scars and think they know the story, but they don't." For a while, neither of them spoke. The cabin lights dimmed as the ship entered a quieter phase of travel. Most passengers settled into their seats, but their eyes still slid toward Lariah and the human who sat beside her without moving away. It was strange. People expected him to leave, but he didn't. Daniel just sat there like the smell didn't touch him at all, like he belonged there, like maybe she belonged there too. Finally, he said softly, "You ever wonder why the galaxy's so full of noise? Everyone talking, judging, fighting. And then, there are some places where it's just quiet, where no one says anything." Lariah nodded slowly. "I like the quiet." "Me too," Daniel said. Then, with a small smile, he added, "Maybe that's why I sat here. Feels quieter here, even with all their talking." Something shifted in Lariah's chest. A small thing, a fragile thing. Hope. For the first time in years, someone didn't leave. Someone didn't tell her to go away. Someone didn't act like she was poison. And she didn't know why, but it felt like this meeting wasn't going to end the way all the others had. The starship Aurora Dawn drifted through the black sea of space like a silent bird. The passengers slowly grew quiet. Some closed their eyes to rest. Others pretended to read or watch the stars, but their ears stayed open. Everyone still wondered why the human man had not left the alien girl with the strange scent. Lariah sat very still. The man beside her, Daniel, had told her about the flowers on the planet Varen, the flowers with the same smell as her own scent. He said the smell reminded him of life, of survival. But Lariah could not understand. How could something everyone hated remind him of something good? She turned to look at him. He was staring out the window now, his face unreadable. His jacket looked old, with burn marks near the sleeves. The kind of jacket that had seen war, fire, and death. His hands rested calmly on his lap, but there was a heaviness in the way he sat, like someone carrying memories too big for words. "Tell me," she said softly, surprising herself, "what really happened on Varen?" Daniel's eyes stayed on the stars for a long moment before he spoke. "It was a long time ago," he said. "I was young, maybe too young for war. We were sent to Varen to protect a colony. But the enemy came faster than anyone expected. There was no time to call for help." His voice was quiet, but every word felt heavy, like each one carried the weight of that night. "They hit us hard," he continued. "Orbital strikes. Fire from the sky. Our defenses didn't last long. I remember running through smoke, hearing people scream, the ground shaking under my feet. Then, there was an explosion. Big one. I don't remember much after that." He paused, his jaw tight. "When I woke up," he said slowly, "I was lying in a field. Everything was burning around me. Buildings, ships, even the sky looked like fire. But that field, for some reason, was full of flowers. Blue and silver flowers. They glowed at night. Same scent as this." Lariah didn't move. Her eyes stayed on his face. Daniel gave a small, strange smile. "I thought I was going to die there. Couldn't walk. My leg was broken. My comms were destroyed. I had no weapon, no food, nothing. Just me. And those flowers." He leaned back in his seat, eyes still far away. "For 3 days I lay there, alone, hungry. I kept smelling those flowers. At first it was too strong. I hated it. But after a while, it became the only thing I knew. That smell told me I was still breathing, that I was still alive." Lariah felt something twist inside her chest. On her planet, people moved away from her when the wind carried her scent. Children teased her. Adults whispered. Even her own parents had sent her to live with strangers because they couldn't stand it anymore. Yet here was a man who smelled the same thing, and called it life. "What happened then?" she asked softly. Daniel's eyes darkened. "Rescue ships came on the 4th day, picked up survivors. Not many of us left. When they carried me out of that field, I kept smelling those flowers in my dreams for weeks, maybe months. I guess part of me never left Varen." Silence stretched between them. The passengers nearby pretended not to listen, but they heard every word. Some of them shifted uncomfortably. For the first time, a few pairs of eyes turned toward Lariah with something other than judgment. Maybe curiosity, maybe respect. Daniel finally looked at her. "That's why I sat here," he said simply. "Your scent. It reminds me I lived through that. Reminds me life keeps going, even when you think it won't." Lariah swallowed hard. No one had ever spoken to her like this before. No one had ever given her scent meaning before. For a moment, she didn't feel like the marked one. She didn't feel cursed. She felt seen. Daniel leaned back again, closing his eyes as if the memory was too heavy to carry for long. The hum of the ship filled the silence. Lariah sat beside him, heart beating fast. Something new was growing in her chest. A small, dangerous thing called hope. And for the first time in her life, she wondered if meeting this human might change everything. The starship Aurora Dawn glided smoothly through space. Most passengers had started to relax. The lights inside the cabin glowed soft and warm, and the sound of the engines became a steady rhythm in the background. Lariah sat beside Daniel, silent but calmer now. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like a shadow. The human soldier hadn't left. He had spoken to her like she mattered, like she was not cursed. But peace never lasted long in the galaxy. The first sign of trouble came as a faint thud under the ship's floor. A shiver ran through the metal frame, so small most passengers didn't notice. Daniel noticed. He opened his eyes slowly, his soldier instincts waking like a wild animal ready to fight. He had felt this before, in war zones, on battle cruisers, in places where the air turned deadly without warning. Then came the second thud. Louder. The lights flickered once. Passengers sat up straight, whispering nervously. A mother held her child closer. Traders looked around like someone might rob them any moment. Daniel's jaw tightened. "This isn't normal," he muttered. Lariah looked at him, eyes wide. "What is it?" He didn't answer. He was listening. Then the third impact hit. This time the whole ship shook. Alarms screamed through the cabin. Red lights flashed on the ceiling. The captain's voice cut through the noise. "All passengers stay seated. We have incoming hostiles. Pirate ships detected. Lockdown in progress." Panic exploded like fire through the cabin. "Pirates? Out here? We're dead. They'll kill us all." People shouted, some crying, others fumbling with seatbelts. The smell of fear filled the air, thicker than Lariah's scent ever had. Daniel stayed calm, scanning exits, counting people, thinking like a soldier again. The ship jolted violently as something slammed against its side. The lights went out for 3 long seconds before backup power brought them back in a dim red glow. Lariah gripped her seat tightly. Her heart pounded as boots clanged outside the hull. The pirates were boarding. The airlock door at the far end of the cabin hissed. Then it blew open with a burst of smoke. They came in fast. Tall figures in black armor, faces covered with metal masks, guns ready. Their leader had a jagged scar running down his neck, visible even under the helmet lights. "Everyone stay down," the leader barked. His voice was rough like gravel. "Hand over all valuables, and maybe we let you live." Passengers froze. Some raised their hands. Others clutched bags, hoping the pirates wouldn't notice. Daniel's eyes moved slowly, calculating. He was unarmed. His weapon had been taken at the security gate when he boarded. He looked at the pirates' guns, their armor, their positions. Too many to fight empty-handed. But then, something strange happened. The first pirate who came close to Lariah stopped suddenly. He tilted his head, sniffing the air through his mask. "What is that smell?" he muttered. Another pirate came closer and gagged. "What is this?" he shouted, coughing violently. Within seconds, the strong, bittersweet scent around Lariah hit them all. The pirates began to choke, their eyes watering even behind the helmets. One ripped his mask off, gasping like he couldn't breathe. Passengers stared in shock. "It's her," someone whispered. "The smell. It's too much for them." The pirates stumbled back, trying to cover their faces. Their leader shouted orders, but his voice cracked as the scent grew stronger the closer they got to Lariah. Daniel's eyes lit up with understanding. The smell everyone hated was turning into a weapon. He leaned close to Lariah. "Stand up," he whispered. She froze. "What?" "Stand," he said firmly. "Walk toward them." Slowly. Passengers gasped as Lariah rose to her feet. The pirates cursed, aiming their weapons, but the closer she moved, the harder they coughed. One dropped his gun, falling to his knees. Another ran back toward the airlock, gagging loudly. The leader stumbled, eyes red, voice broken. "Get back!" he shouted, but his words ended in a fit of choking. Daniel didn't waste time. He grabbed the fallen gun and moved fast, his soldier training snapping into place. Within minutes, the pirates retreated the way they came, dragging their leader with them, coughing and swearing until the airlock door slammed shut behind them. Silence filled the cabin. The passengers stared at Lariah like they had never seen her before. The girl everyone avoided had just saved them all. Daniel lowered the weapon slowly, scanning for any remaining threats. Then he turned to Lariah with a small, approving nod. "Guess your curse isn't a curse after all," he said quietly. For the first time in her life, Lariah stood tall while others stared. Not in disgust, but in awe. And she realized something new. For once, no one was whispering anymore. The Aurora Dawn floated in silence after the pirate attack. The passengers were still shaken, some whispering nervously, others clinging to their families. The smell of burned metal and fear still lingered in the air, mixing strangely with the faint, bittersweet scent coming from Lariah. But now, no one moved away from it. No one covered their nose. No one dared to call it disgusting, because the same scent they hated a few hours ago had just saved their lives. Daniel lowered the weapon he had taken from the pirates. His hands moved with the calm confidence of someone who had seen worse battles than this. He checked the hallway beyond the airlock one last time before turning back to the cabin. His eyes met Lariah's. She was standing straight, her silver blue skin glowing softly in the emergency lights. Her violet eyes, usually shy and downcast, now looked brighter, like something inside her had shifted. The same passengers who had whispered cruel things about her earlier were now staring with wide, uncertain eyes. Daniel spoke first. "They're gone," he said simply. "Ship is secure." The captain's voice came over the comms, sounding shaky but alive. "All clear. Pirates retreated. We're heading back on course. Thank you for your cooperation, passengers." Daniel gave a small half-smile. "Cooperation, huh? Guess they forgot to mention who really scared the pirates off." Several passengers looked away, embarrassed. The man who had mocked Lariah earlier, the one who had said she smelled like poison, cleared his throat awkwardly. Miss," he said, voice softer now. "I think we all owe you thanks." Lariah froze. She had never heard those words in her entire life. Another passenger, a woman clutching her child, nodded quickly. "If not for you, they might have killed us." A few others murmured agreement. Lariah didn't know what to do. All her life, people told her to leave, to stay far away, to hide herself. Now those same kinds of people were looking at her with something like respect, maybe even gratitude. Felt strange. Felt unreal. Daniel noticed the way she stood there stiffly, like she didn't believe any of it was real. He stepped closer, his voice calm but steady. "They're right. You saved them. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Lariah turned to him slowly. "I didn't do anything. It was just..." She hesitated. "It was just my curse." "Curse?" Daniel shook his head. "You call it a curse. I call it survival." He said it simply, like it was the most obvious thing in the galaxy. The passengers kept watching. Some still looked uncomfortable, as if unsure what to say. But others nodded at Lariah respectfully before returning to their seats. For the first time in her life, no one looked at her with disgust. It felt like the walls around her heart, walls she had built over years of rejection, were beginning to crack. Daniel sat down again, placing the pirate weapon on the floor beside him. He leaned back, his soldier's posture relaxing just slightly. "You okay?" he asked Lariah. She nodded slowly. "I think so." "You were brave," he said. She shook her head. "I was just standing there. I didn't fight. I didn't even move." Daniel gave a small smile. "Sometimes standing your ground is the bravest thing you can do." Lariah didn't know how to answer. For so long, she had been told she was a burden, that her scent was something to hide, that she was cursed. But this man, this stranger, spoke to her like she had done something important, like she had value. The ship slowly returned to normal speed. The alarms stopped. The lights came back fully. The passengers started whispering less and sitting down again. But the way they looked at Lariah had changed. A little boy from the back rows walked up shyly, holding a piece of candy in his small hand. He looked up at her with big eyes. "Miss, thank you," he said softly, offering the candy like it was a medal of honor. Lariah blinked in surprise. Her hands trembled as she took it. "You're welcome," she whispered. Daniel watched the scene quietly. He could see it on her face, the way she didn't know how to handle kindness because she had lived without it for too long. For him, war had left scars on the outside. For her, life had left scars on the inside. But tonight, something had changed for both of them. When the boy returned to his seat, Lariah sat back down slowly. She turned to Daniel. Her voice was small but steady. No one ever thanked me before. Daniel looked at her calmly. Get used to it. She almost smiled at that. Almost. But deep inside, a part of her wondered if this human, this strange, scarred soldier, might be the first person in her life who didn't see her as the marked one. Maybe he saw something else entirely. The Aurora Dawn sailed through the endless dark, leaving the pirate attack behind like a bad dream. The passengers were calmer now. Some whispered about what had happened. Others just sat quietly, holding their loved ones close. But everyone's eyes kept drifting toward the same two people. The alien girl, the human soldier. Lariah sat in silence, staring at the piece of candy the child had given her earlier. It was small, wrapped in shiny red paper. Her hands trembled slightly as she held it. She wasn't used to gifts. She wasn't used to kindness. Her whole life people avoided her. Some laughed behind her back. Some told her to leave their towns, their markets, even their homes. She had learned to expect only fear or anger in people's eyes when they looked at her. But now the passengers who once whispered about her scent had seen her stand tall when the pirates came. They had seen the invaders run coughing from the cabin while she stayed still, unshaken. And they had seen the human soldier at her side, calm and unafraid, as if sitting beside her was the most natural thing in the world. Lariah didn't understand it. She didn't understand him. Daniel sat with his arms crossed, his soldier's jacket marked with age and battles fought long ago. He looked relaxed, but his eyes kept scanning the room the way soldiers always did, checking exits, watching movements, listening for trouble before it came. Finally, Lariah spoke softly. Why did you sit here? At the start, before everything happened. Daniel turned his head slowly toward her. I told you. The smell reminded me of a place. A time. Varen, she said quietly. He nodded. Yeah, Varen. She hesitated. But you didn't have to stay after you sat down. Most people leave after a few seconds. You didn't. Daniel's eyes softened just slightly. Because leaving would have been rude. Lariah almost laughed at that. A small, broken sound escaped her lips. Rude? That's the reason. He shrugged lightly. I've seen worse things than a smell, Lariah. The way he said her name made her heart beat strangely. Like he wasn't afraid to say it. Like he wasn't afraid of her. She studied his face carefully. There were scars on his cheek, thin and pale against his skin. His eyes looked older than the rest of him, like they had watched too many people die. You fought in many wars? She asked softly. Too many, he said simply. And you survived them all. His jaw tightened slightly. Not all of me. The words hung between them like heavy stones. Lariah didn't ask what he meant. She could feel it in his voice. The weight of people lost, friends buried, things broken inside him that couldn't be fixed. For a long time, neither spoke. The Aurora Dawn hummed softly around them. Somewhere in the back rows, a child laughed. Somewhere else, someone coughed quietly. Finally, Lariah said, When the pirates came, I wasn't scared. Daniel raised an eyebrow. No, she shook her head slowly. I've spent my whole life afraid of people, of their words, of their stares. But when they came with guns, I wasn't scared at all. Isn't that strange? Daniel leaned back in his seat. Not strange, he said. Sometimes the things we fear aren't the real dangers. Sometimes the real danger shows up wearing armor and carrying weapons. She thought about that for a while. Daniel looked around the cabin, lowering his voice so only she could hear. They won't bother this ship again. Not after what happened. Lariah frowned slightly. Because of me? He nodded. Word will spread. Pirates talk. They'll say this ship carries a girl who makes the air burn in your lungs. They won't risk it twice. Lariah didn't know whether to feel proud or scared. But one thing she did feel was different. All her life, her scent had been a reason for people to push her away. Now it was the reason everyone on this ship was alive. Daniel reached into his jacket and pulled out a small metal tag on a chain. It was scratched, dented, clearly old. What is that? Lariah asked. Dog tag, he said. Soldiers wear them. Has your name, your unit, in case you don't make it home. She looked at him silently. You kept it. Yeah, he said softly. To remind me of the people who didn't. There was no sadness in his voice, only truth. For some reason, that made Lariah trust him more than anyone she had ever met. The silence between them now felt different. Not empty, not cold. Felt safe. Maybe for the first time in both their lives. The Aurora Dawn sailed quietly now. The stars outside stretched like silver rivers across the black sky. Inside the ship, the passengers had calmed down after the pirate attack. Some slept. Some whispered softly. But one thing had changed. No one looked at Lariah with fear or disgust anymore. For the first time in her life, she wasn't the cursed one. Lariah sat in her seat, holding the small candy the child had given her earlier. She hadn't eaten it yet. She just kept turning it in her hands, the shiny red wrapper catching the cabin lights. It was such a small thing, but to her, it felt heavy, felt important. Daniel sat beside her, his arms crossed, his soldier's jacket creased and worn. He looked like a man who had been through too much yet still carried himself like the ground under his feet would never shake him again. They hadn't spoken for a while, but it wasn't an awkward silence. It was a quiet that felt safe, like both of them knew words weren't always needed. Finally, Daniel spoke. His voice was calm but firm. Where are you going after this? Lariah looked down at the candy. I don't know, she said softly. I never stay anywhere long. People don't like being near me. Daniel studied her for a moment. That's going to change. She shook her head. You don't understand. It's always the same. New city, new people, same looks, same whispers. He leaned back, his eyes on the stars outside. Then maybe you've just been going to the wrong places. She turned to him slowly. And you know the right places? Daniel gave a small smile. I know a place where no one cares about things like that. A place where you can walk through the streets and people don't point or whisper. Where you can actually belong. Lariah blinked, surprised. Where? Earth, he said simply. She stared at him. Your home. Yeah, he said. My home. He paused for a moment. Come with me when we land. No one there's going to push you away. Lariah's heart thumped hard in her chest. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe such a place existed. But she had spent her whole life hearing people call her cursed, hearing doors close in her face. I don't think I'd fit in, she whispered. Daniel shook his head. You fit in wherever you decide to fit in. People like to talk. Let them. You keep walking anyway. She looked at him, really looked at him this time. At the scars on his face. At the calm strength in his eyes. You believe that? She asked softly. I lived that, he said simply. People see scars and think they know you. They don't. People saw you and thought they knew you too. They were wrong. She didn't answer. She didn't know what to say. The ship's captain announced over the comms that they would reach the station in 2 hours. Passengers started gathering their things. The child who had given Lariah the candy waved at her shyly from across the cabin. For the first time in her life, someone waved at her without fear in their eyes. When the ship finally landed, the passengers filed out slowly. Some stopped to thank Lariah again before leaving. The man who had mocked her scent earlier gave her an awkward nod before hurrying away. She stood near the exit, unsure if she should follow Daniel or go her own way. She had always traveled alone. That was how her life worked. She came, she left, she was forgotten. But then Daniel turned back toward her. You coming? He asked simply. She hesitated. Are you sure? He raised an eyebrow. You saved a whole ship, Lariah. The least I can do is give you a place to stay. For a moment, she just stared at him. At the man who hadn't left the empty seat. The man who hadn't judged her. The man who looked at her and didn't see a curse. Slowly, she stepped toward him. When they walked out of the ship together, Lariah felt something she hadn't felt in years. Not fear, not shame. Something small but powerful. Hope. Maybe Earth really would be different. Maybe this human soldier really meant what he said. Maybe this was the beginning of a life where she wasn't just the marked one. Maybe this was the beginning of home.